This is Girl Talk, brought to you from Girls Preparatory School, Chattanooga, Tennessee.
Hello, I'm Dr. Autumn Graves, head of Girls Preparatory School in Chattanooga, Tennessee. You are listening to the Girl Talk Podcast, Episode 5. Today, we explore the topic of social media and how we, as a community of parents and educators, can help girls navigate the social, emotional complexities of this powerful platform. First, you will hear an interview with Katie Mcpherson, the Executive Director of the Gurian Institute, from when she visited our campus to speak to our parents, faculty and staff, and most importantly, our girls, about the effects of social media on girls. Katie, could you tell me a little bit about the effects of social media on girls? Maybe areas of their lives that are impacted positively or negatively?
Absolutely. It's been a blast of a day so far. I can't wait to talk to the girls. So social media on girls, lots of the platforms speak to images. And so girls love to use photographs to convey their creative talents and geniuses. So there's plenty of positive that can come from it. Training girls to brand and market themselves for their future is really a goal that I would say is out there for social media on girls. The hardest part is the negative impact in what we see from those images and just trying to keep up with your peer group and really posting photos that are really a highlight reel of your life and just the pressure that these girls are under to keep up with the social group and to convey maybe something that they're not. I spoke today in my session about the different avatars and personas that they go in and out of. So part of the developmental phase of being a tween or teen is trying on different ways of dressing and looking and acting. And so that can be played out on social media, but the harm or the danger is that the peer group can make fun of that. They can post about it. They can comment. They can exclude. And so there's almost a double layer of pressure against girls versus boys.
How do you see parents adjusting to their teens having this immediate access to a world of information? Or how do you recommend that they adjust?
Yeah, being so proactive versus reactive I feel like they wait too long to jump in or intervene when something's happening. And so having a really solid plan and incremental trust. So starting when they're 8, 9, 10 years old, having courageous conversations about if we're going to get you a phone or a device, these are the reasonable rules of the device, and really coming up as a family with a plan as to how we're going to be consistent. Because in my session today, I talked about this exhausting dance that parents are doing because they don't have a plan. They're just making it up as they go along, and they don't have enough awareness and education about these platforms themselves to be able to speak to their children about it. So I always highly recommend being in the know, being online and researching the different apps, but also having a plan and a central charging station to be able to take those devices at night and put them places where kids can't get at them and where kids are getting really good rest, because it does really impact the developing brain.
So, Katie, you touched on some of those guidelines, setting up a central charging station and creating a plan. Can you talk a little bit more about those and how parents can help manage the boundary of their kids' technologies?
Sure. There are hundreds of templates online, family data contracts or family screen time contracts. It's really important that girls especially have boundaries around the use of their device, because the dopamine that they get from some of the apps is really driving that brain to want more. And so if we're really going to balance technology and cumulative use, we've got to look at how do I put that in place at home. So having a plan where you sit down and say, well, what do you think is fair? And having your daughter be able to say, well, I want to be able to use it between 7 and 9 p.m. And so if that's something that you feel like you can consistently have, then that will be part of your plan. But it needs to be written and it needs to be posted somewhere so that the whole family is kind of holding each other accountable for that. I would also say with the central charging station that it needs to be something very consistent, that every night, even adult devices are in the off position. I find myself having my phone on my nightstand. If I wake up in the middle of the night, I'm looking at it, and then I can't get back to sleep because the blue light behind the device is telling my brain to wake up. And so it's important for adults too to have that balance and be modeling that for kids. I think the hardest thing is truly unplugging yourself. If you're going to welcome it, then embrace it. I gave an example today of Tech Talk Tuesday. So once a month, having dinner together and talking about technology. Everybody take out your phones. Let's look at your newsfeed. What's going on in the world that we can have a conversation about? What's the kindest thing you see on your newsfeed? What's the craziest thing? And having conversations around what is the end game of this post for this person? Because then that really drives the student to think, okay, when I'm posting, what is my end game? This duck face selfie or whatever I'm posting, what am I after in this photo? Am I really representing my best self?
I really like the idea of a Tech Talk Tuesday and really making children think about what they are doing and seeing on social media. Can you talk about some of the positive impacts of social media on girls?
Yeah, schools call all the time and say, can you talk to our girls or our boys or all of our students about not posting inappropriate photos or not posting things that can get them in trouble? And I say, yes, I would love to do that, and I can do that. But the reality is the developing brain doesn't see the consequence. So when we look at positive impacts, what I love to talk about is how do you use this for good? How will you show the world who you are? And so I actually do sort of a fun activity, I think, where they trace their footprint. And I ask them, if you could only have 30 seconds to tell the world who you are, what you do, and what's awesome about you, what 4 adjectives would you use or 4 activities would you use? So they list those. And then we talk about what does that say about you? And your digital footprint is permanent. I think that's the training for sure that needs to start and be continuous for kids, is that your digital footprint is permanent and it could be an amazing tool for your future.
Mm-hmm. Are there any tips you like to arm parents with as social media and technology continue to change? What is the best takeaway advice you most want parents to hear?
I think the takeaway advice is if you're going to give your child an app, you have to have the app too. And you need to be following, you need to be supervising and managing it. The landscape is changing in that app makers are going to continue to make apps that may or may not be great for kids, but we're also moving into a virtual reality landscape where a lot of the games and the apps are going to become much more interactive with virtual reality headsets and things like that. So that is going to also have an impact on developing brain. So for a parent, just to stay in the know what your child has, have a kind of a 2-factor authentication that if they want to purchase something, that there's a way for you to say yes or no to that, and just really be dialed in. It all goes back to relationship. It doesn't matter if it's Snapchat, Instagram, Twitter, House Party, TBH, whatever the app is. At the end of the day, the conversation that might have to happen is really about, how do I help you through this? How do I support you? Or how do we use this app for good?
Katie, is there anything else we didn't talk about that you really think we need to include?
I think, a lot of parents ask a couple things. One is, should I read their text messages? In my personal opinion, as a fellow parent, yes, you should be randomly checking text messages. Could you check every text message? Yes, but you would be exhausted. And so just to be aware that you're going to see things on text or on these apps that are probably not going to align with your family values. And in those moments, those are profound moments where your child can gain social competence, where you can help them through, okay, this post probably wasn't the best. Let's think through this process together. And I would also say, even today, but I get this question all the time. If I don't allow my child to have Snapchat or social media, am I putting them at a deficit? And for me personally, it really goes back to, if the friendship group is saying, if you don't have Snapchat, we're not going to be friends with you, then we really have to define what friendship is, because to me personally, that's just kind of silly. But a happy medium may be find another platform that he or she could be on that gives them exposure, but it's safer. You can follow them and you can log in and really keep more tabs on them, just knowing that Snapchat is so difficult to supervise.
You mentioned online resources for parents. Do you mind sharing those with us?
My favorite website is safesmartsocial.com. It's very comprehensive. It updates the app chart so you can know what's out there. Some of them will fall off. New ones will be added on. It really gives you kind of the good, the bad, and the ugly. It also gives tutorials on all of the big apps so you can figure out how does this work and why is my kid so fascinated with it. I would also say commonsensemedia.org is a really great website. They do movies and social media and give reviews on what's out there. So those two would probably be my best resources, and the other would be fbi.gov. If you have younger students, they have a free online surfing safety net curriculum that you can lead your child through.
Katie, I know you have 4 daughters. What is your favorite offline thing to do with them?
My favorite offline thing to do is probably, I love, to be honest with you, it's the authentic moments where we're driving and we have the craziest conversations because it's like rapid fire ping pong. So going to do an activity together, but my favorite time is literally listening to them in the back seat because they have the funniest conversations that I wish I could record.
Thank you so much for your time, Katie. I really appreciate it. As an educator for almost 25 years, one of the things that I've learned is that parents are such an important part of the partnership, that we cannot educate and raise girls in isolation from each other. We really have to do it as a complement to each other. And so I'm really excited here to have Kristen Tremaine, who is a mother of 4, including a current GPS middle school student. Thank you so much, Kristen, for being willing to come and talk with me for a little bit.
Absolutely.
So, Kristen, you are a really engaged parent, and I really appreciate your approach to parenting, as we've seen evidence of that here at school and as well as a volunteer within our community. Can you tell me a little bit about what surprised you maybe from Katie's presentation?
Yes, Katie said a lot that night that made it really clear to me that this technology, these little devices that our children are carrying around are here to stay. And Katie just really, in a very concise and articulate way, described what this thing now means for us as families and in our culture and its ubiquitousness really in our lives.
So I know that you and your husband have spent a decent amount of time really thinking about this and learning more about social media and its impact on children, on teens. What did Katie's talk confirm for you?
I think what Katie did was really put a positive spin on this. I will have to say that there was a part of me that felt anxious and a bit fearful of this technology and, again, kind of the surge and the intensity of this media in our home. And I think when she talked about digital citizenship and coming together as parents, as moms of girls in particular, who could get together and talk about this thing that now seemed to be pervasive in our homes, what strength could come and what encouragement could come in that, which her talk coinciding with a book that I was reading at the time called The Tech-Wise Family really gave me hope and encouragement and really put a positive spin on what this can be. It reminded me that I'm still the parent, that my yes is yes and my no is no, and that this thing was not overtaking us, but yet we could have boundaries in our family to technology.
Yeah, I love that. It's about the boundaries. And Katie talks a bit about this idea of having a plan, just being really open and honest and transparent about what your expectations are as a family. Can you talk with us a little bit about what your family plan is around social media and technology?
Sure. We started with ages. In other words, we said at 13, you'll be given a phone, and that is simply for convenience sake. Now, that 13 is not a hard, fast 13 because it's also looking at what kind of decisions have you made up into your 13th birthday. I mean, have they been good? Have you been making mature, wise decisions? If so, here is a phone, and to be clear, this phone is not yours. This is a family phone. It is on loan to you. So with this phone, we're also handing you a contract, and this contract to be signed by you and by us, your parents, is expected to be adhered to. And if not, the phone will be taken away, or there will be privileges taken away with that phone. Social media is not a part of that phone at 13. It is simply a communication device, so texting and calling in regards to where you are, when you need to be picked up, this sort of thing. We did allow social media apps to be introduced to our 2 older children at the age of 15. One of my children, I sometimes think that phone is anatomically grafted into his hand, like it does. Now, the upside of that is I know I can always reach him. The other child is just kind of, is it on you? Is it not? Am I going to be able to get you? When they're really attached to that phone, social media can become a real bad habit. And so we've had to put guidelines in place for that too. Now, I will say with this contract that we gave to our children at the same time they received a phone, that is always in flux. I feel like with age and with wise decisions, we will expand, times that you're allowed to be on your phone, or times that you're allowed to be in front of a screen, or weekends may be given more. But it is necessary because I don't believe that their minds nor ours are intended to intake as much information as is possible. That there is so much, in particular with social media, to feel like you need to keep up with, that we need to help them, still teenagers, still under our roof, still children learning how to navigate life, that we must help them make wise decisions on what is appropriate, what is permissible, and put time constraints and boundaries on their time spent, in particular on social media.
So I'm curious as to where some of these conversations take place and what will prompt some of those conversations with your children.
Some of them will be like, I'm about to pull out my hair, and I'm like, we need to talk. But I think key is that we've always had open conversation with our children. Connectivity is just so important because it's the conversations we had about music and the conversations we had about television and what kind of guidelines we were putting in place when they were a young age now just merge into social media. We are the first parents to parent this, so I can't call my mother up and say, what did you do when I was 13 and my head was down all day in my screen? So we're learning as we go. So these contracts will be a bit fluid as well because, again, we're learning and things are changing so quick. But bottom line is I still believe that we have an obligation to teach our children courage. We have an obligation to teach our children wisdom and compassion and empathy and wise choice making, and all of these things don't happen through social media. And I think sometimes my husband and I will come to a place where we're like, you know what, we really need to address the fact that so-and-so's time has been, we're just seeing a lot too much being drawn into the screen, whether it be a game or social media or what have you. It's time to take a break. Sometimes it'll just be on the fly where I'll have to take a deep breath and say, listen, turn off your phone when you're with me in the car. I mean, this is just common courtesy. And this is manners. Manners, another big thing we have to teach because I think they've fallen by the wayside in regard to social media.
I so appreciate your comments. I really appreciate, Kristen, that perspective about this is about common courtesy and manners, and that I think sometimes that has been lost in our society. I'd love, though, to pick up on something that you spoke to, and it seems as if you're referencing almost this community, though, of parents. This idea that you are not alone in this. And I know that you've been a part of a group of, I think, just mostly mothers who talk periodically or get together periodically and talk about parenting. And one of those conversations was centered around social media after Katie Mcpherson came to speak. Can you talk a little bit about how the genesis of that group and what you all discussed in terms of social media and parenting?
So after Katie McPherson's talk, I got in my car and I just kind of sat there trying to sift through, again, nothing surprising, but I think confirming in a lot of my thoughts and my gut feelings towards social media, and really realizing whereas we had put a contract in place and we had put some guidelines in our family, there's a lot to be talked about continually in this regard. So I just jotted down a handful of names of other mothers who I had seen there in the crowd that night and shot out to 5, 6, 7 people just an invitation to come and meet for coffee and said, please extend that to anybody else. Well, about 20 mothers showed up for that coffee, which alone said, you know what, we need to be talking about this. We are not alone in trying to navigate this. We need each other. And that was one of the points in Katie Mcpherson's presentation was it takes a village. You really need other people around you. It was just an encouragement to see like-mindedness. I think all those that showed up said, you know what, we don't like the arguments that are happening in our home over this. And it was also encouraging to hear other moms say, I don't like when girls come over and they're all on their phones and spend the nights, and understanding that the majority of moms in there would say, these phones need to go away. Be present with the ones around you. And so I really feel like there was some momentum. We've had another follow-up from that, and we actually have a discussion going about a retreat with moms and daughters to talk about technology and how this impacts, because I think that when you get moms and daughters together, there will be a bit of an openness as we find freedom around our peers to speak, maybe that which I wouldn't so boldly say to my daughter, or she wouldn't so boldly say to me, but kind of feel a strength in peer numbers and understanding each other. And another one is just to find more outlets where we can be with our girls outside on weekends, on holidays, where they're not going to hole up in their room, or the temptation as a default is to fall into a screen and just be texting nonsense.
You know, it's about your tribe. So often I appreciate you talking about this in terms of mothers and daughters. And as you look at so much of the research about girls becoming women, so much of it, what we read about is them having a tribe, and that this sense of community as you go about making some decisions, as you think through things, as you figure out where you want to be and how you want to do certain things. I mean, and I appreciate that you're seeing the strength of the tribe, and that the tribe is not always just for kind of a social outlet. And I applaud that you all are willing to engage in this way and to try to take power back and to be empowered and to not kind of abdicate to, I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm going to throw my hands up and I'm giving up. Because as soon as a kid knows that the parent has given up, they give up on themselves. And so I think that's so important, that you're not willing to give up, and not willing to give up on some really core character skills that they need to develop, that you're just not born being empathetic.
That's right.
That you're in this journey with them, and thinking about the role of social media as a part of that journey. So I really appreciate that. And I hope those who are listening feel empowered and encouraged that they too can do something just that simple. Kristen, what message do you feel is most important for other parents to take away from our conversation today?
I think it's really important to have guidelines in place, a contract. What really speaks to you? What are your parameters? What are your guidelines? And to really think about what pings you at home. With technology so everywhere in our homes, what is it that you feel like is standing in the way of real connection between you and your child? And deal with that. Look at it and say, is it that they're heads down all the time? Do we make a point to have conversation? Do we have an area of our home that is tech-free, where we know this is a place of creativity and conversation, and really continuing conversations with one another and spending time face-to-face, eye-to-eye, and knowing each other? Because I think one of the false messages that we can receive is that we are having connectivity. You know, there are many studies out there that say we are the most prescription drug-induced, lonely, suicidal, panic-prone culture ever, and yet feeling the most connected, and yet we're the most lonely. And we are in isolation, and I think that in isolation on our computers gives us the false sense of really being connected, and yet it's so superficial, and we're missing out on real relationships.
Thank you, Kristen, and thank you for those words of encouraging parents to take ownership, be empowered, and that they have the permission to parent. So thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Now, joining me are Lynn Macheski, head of middle school, and Debbie Glasscock, middle school dean of students, to talk about the impacts of social media on girls in middle school and how our school supports girls and their parents. Lynn and Debbie, thank you so much for joining me today.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
How does social media or technology impact the lives of middle school girls? I'm thinking about this in terms of socially, emotionally, or even academically. And how do you see some of those impacts spill into our everyday life here at school?
In my role as Dean of Students, I see the social emotional part of it because girls have their feelings hurt if they feel left out. They've seen a picture on Snapchat or Instagram. They're not in that picture. They are left out. They get jealous when they see those types of things and angry at their friends. What they don't understand is mom's car only holds 3 other people. If the group is larger than that, they can't go. It's not their friend's choice. It's a parental choice. I also see a lot of misunderstandings happening because of texts. There's no tone of voice with a text. There's no facial expression with a text. So a lot of hurt feelings around things that happen over a device, a digital device.
And I can see it academically as well. If a girl sits down to do her homework in the evening and she is busy working on her science lab reflection and all of a sudden a notification pops up on her screen, even if it's something really benign and isn't going to cause any sort of reaction or is meant to cause a reaction, she's still distracted by that. Or it's even that sense of like having your phone next to you and seeing it flash or it dings or anything like that. And so it's not only the social emotional ramifications sometimes, but it interrupts our brain's ability to continue down one path and really focus on the task at hand. And so we see it academically in a way of either it's taking girls a really long time to finish any work that they're attempting to do, or it's just disrupting the way that they think and their cognitive abilities to really dive deep into what they're working on at the moment.
You know, I hear you both saying that, giving your responses, and I think so much, particularly of what you've just said, Lynn, that we as adults experience this as well.
Absolutely.
And I think that's something, too, that oftentimes matters related to social media or challenges related to social media are relegated to issues with teens or preteens or children. And we need to, as adults, to recognize that we, too, are allowing ourselves to have this kind of distraction and that it does influence the quality of our thinking and the quality of our relationships because of the lack of total engagement that we're having. So I think it's, important for us as adults to realize that we have to heal ourselves sometimes before we can really engage deeply in healing or fixing things with our girls. So Debbie, I want to continue along the line of the role of these hurt feelings, these interactions, and the role that they have here at school. How do you see some of those things that are happening outside of school, at home, on the weekends? How do you see that impacting what's going on here as girls are walking through the hallways or sitting at lunch?
If it happens over a device, whether it's an iPad or a phone, they are not talking to each other, and they can involve a lot of other people. And if a disagreement is just between 2 girls, there are suddenly many more people involved who take sides. And what we try to do is have the original girls who have a disagreement to come in and talk face to face to each other, which is what's not happening. And sometimes they need help navigating that conversation because it's uncomfortable. Doing it over a device makes it less uncomfortable, and they are not getting the practice of having those difficult conversations and learning how to problem solve and work their way through that. So that's what we try to do. We try to get back to the source of the issue and teach them how to navigate from there and not involve so many people via social media or text.
Debbie, I appreciate that we put the human side back into the interaction. So if you can expand maybe a little bit more, that's one approach that we take as a school in trying to address some of these challenges that can be related to social media, particularly because it's oftentimes dealing with something that didn't happen at school, but has an impact in school. Are there other approaches, guidelines, or programs that you have created or joined forces with other teachers here to implement to really help to navigate through some of the impact of the social emotional parts of social media?
We have digital literacy and digital citizenship interwoven through different courses, through our advisory program. The 6th and 7th grade computer science classes each have a different component. They have online safety in 6th grade. In 7th grade, they talk about digital citizenship and what it means, how you comport yourself online. In 8th grade changes and choices, it is the boundaries that you set for yourself, whether in person or online, and how do you present yourself publicly, which carries over to online as well. So we address it in specific classes, and every single student has those classes. So we know we hit every student. It's also addressed in advisory, and we can use advisory to address an issue that comes up immediately. We have the flexibility there to bring it up in a timely manner, and we can do that in advisory.
I can add to that. When Katie Mcpherson was here and she was speaking with our girls and our parents and our faculty, she talked a lot about your permanent digital footprint. And we spent a lot of time talking with our girls about what that looks like and what that means. And so when they are thinking about posting something online, they are thinking about the here and now. They want to be funny. They want to be popular. They want to get as many likes as possible. And they have that endorphin rush when they do that. Their frontal lobe is not developed enough yet to think about what the ramifications are of that post, if any, the next day, a week from then, 3 years from now, as they go to apply for college. And so I really liked how Katie talked about our role as adults in the community is to help them navigate that world and guide them and teach them and talk with them and continue the conversations on your online presence. And our faculty and our advisors are really amazing at cultivating those relationships with our girls so that they can have those hard conversations with them. And I have seen Debbie so many times sit down with a girl and have a conversation about, you're not in trouble, but we really want to talk to you about who you are online. What is this sharing with the greater community at GPS and the greater world about who you are, and is that who you want to be? And Katie really talked too about having our girls create an online portfolio and thinking about, if somebody 10 years from now were to go back and look at what you posted today, what would they think about you? What would that tell them about your interests, and how we can actually use social media to be part of our college portfolio in a positive way, and not just something that is really fun and, exciting at the moment.
And that's what I think is so important about our approach here as a school that is different than I know other schools or other communities embrace. And that is the fact that you can leverage social media to do good. It can be positive. And I think that's why it's so important that we have these pieces of social media and digital citizenry as a part of our program throughout the middle school that really does prepare our girls for when they have some greater freedom as they move into the high school years. Can you talk with us a little bit about how you have partnered with parents in this space of social media? And I'm looking at you, Debbie, because I know you do a lot of that kind of work with our parents in your role as Dean of Students. Talk a little bit about what that is like, what our school's perspective is on that, and how you engage parents to have some real positive outcomes from sometimes something that starts off as a negative.
I want to back up a little to talk about why I'm even engage parents in the first place. Usually it's because something has landed on my desk. And I have found that it gets there very quickly. Within 24 hours of a questionable post, it is usually on my desk. And those students are stunned. Number one, that I have it. They're very embarrassed that I've seen it. Number two, that it was so fast. What they don't understand is when they hit post or send, it is no longer in their control. And that is an issue that I think parents need to address with their student. It is a safety issue. So when I call a student in and we talk about what I've seen, my big concern is that she understands that what she did may not really truly represent who she is, that it could be something that could put her or our community in a less than safe situation, and that it's occasionally some of these girls are not aware that their picture or image has been posted, and that is not acceptable. That is a piece that we address frequently. If you are going to take a photograph of someone else and post it, you have their permission. As an adult on campus, if I take a photograph of a team or a course, I show every student, I'm about to post this on my official Twitter. Is this okay with you? If they say no, I don't do it. I try to model it, but that doesn't always take. But those are the conversations when I call a parent. It's not to get a student in trouble. It's to say, here is my biggest concern. She hasn't represented herself the way I see her. She hasn't represented our school in a way that is best, or she has put herself in a questionable or dangerous situation, or someone has posted a photograph of her and she has every right to say no. So I want them to have a conversation. I don't call to get girls in trouble. I call to say, could you continue this conversation at home and talk about her use of social media or her use of text, and make sure that it's a family choice and the family knows what's happening. They're often surprised that there are no disciplinary consequences. Frequently, there are not. Most often, there are not.
You know, Debbie, what I appreciate about what you've said is that it also speaks to how we as an institution really do care about each girl, and that there are not the just overall blanketed responses, that it's really about understanding each girl, where she's coming from, what this is about, and that you know each girl and can say with a sense of authenticity, I know you, and I know this isn't who you really are, or that there's more to you than this, and that that's what we need to really talk about. And it's that sense of trust and awareness and knowledge that makes all the difference as girls are navigating through these years. So, Lynn and Debbie, both of you are experienced educators. You're also parents, parents of girls.
Yes.
So I would love for you to share with those who are listening right now, who are parents or educators or mentors or aunts or godparents of girls, some tips. If you could give us 2 or 3 of like your top parenting tips that relate to technology and social media, I would really appreciate that. And I think we all would. Lynn, you start.
So my one tip I always tell parents is nothing good ever happens online after 10 p.m. So please do not let your child have their phone in their room after 10 p.m. The second tip I say is monitor your child's social media accounts and their texting. And it's not a gotcha kind of moment. It's not a, I'm looking at this because I don't trust you. It's because I do trust you and I know what's out there. And I want us to be able to have a conversation about everything. I want you to know that this is a partnership. And that's what I really liked about what Kristen talked about too, is the partnership between parents and their kids. That it is really, truly a family choice. Those are probably my 2 big tips. As a parent too, I try to unplug myself when I get home from work and until my kids go to bed. And so just to put my phone away and put my computer away and really be present with my family. Am I always really great at that? Nope. But I try to model it, and we talk about it so that if I'm not modeling it well, my kids have permission to call me out on it and to say, no phones at the table when we're playing a game or something like that. And so I want them to have the permission to do that with me as well, so that when it comes time for them to have a digital device, then, like I said, it's a partnership. We can call each other out on it.
I think that I have been willing, in my role as Dean of Students, when we onboard new students, and we have 6th grade orientation, we have the new students and their parents in the same space at the same time, and I will take the hit and say, parents, don't let the girls have their phones or iPads in their bedrooms overnight. Don't have them use it as their alarm clock. Take it and put it by the back, charge it in the kitchen, charge it in your bedroom, but don't let them have it. And I have to say, I have noticed in the last few years that fewer and fewer girls have iPhones or smartphones than they used to. It used to be every new student had a smartphone, and more parents, I'm happy to see it, hold off on that a little bit longer every year. They're realizing they can communicate. There's a way to communicate with their student, and it does not have to be via smartphone. So I'm glad to see that, but I always tell the students, this is on mean old Miss Glasscock, who is telling your parents, don't let you have that in your bedroom at night.
I really appreciate those words of wisdom. And I also want to add that and underscore what you've both have said that I think sometimes gets lost, in the words of Nancy Reagan, parents, just say no.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Well, thank you all so much for being a part of this episode of Girl Talk, episode 5, about social media and how parents can really harness these opportunities with their daughters to help them develop the character that they want in their girls. And that's Girl Talk for today. Thank you for listening. If you liked the podcast, be sure to share it with your friends or leave us a review on iTunes. If you have questions or comments, please send us an email at girltalkpodcast@gps.edu or feel free to tweet us at GPSBruisers. Here's to the girls.